Hi everyone, Heather here with PersephoneReturns.com, and today I am back with another really special guest, my friend Jana Shiloh, who is a homeopath who's been practicing this form of medicine for 37 years.
Right.
And Jana has a lot of very interesting stories and interesting information that she's going to share with us today. And you've actually, you were just telling me off camera that you helped to start one of the first homeopathy schools in the United States, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Right. Well, when I first got involved with homeopathy, I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know it was good. I didn't know it was bad. I didn't even know the word. And I was in a crisis kind of transition in my life. And I arrived at Boulder where I knew 2 people. And I needed a chiropractor. And my friend said, oh, you should go to this man. His name is George Graff. And he is a chiropractor, but he does something alternative too. And she said, I can't pronounce it. I don't know what it is. So I thought, all right, I'll go see. And I went to see him, and it was, as I said, I was in crisis and I was crying. I just looked like I was broken up with my husband, and I just left the community I'd been living in, and everything was in transition. I didn't know where things were going to go. And he asked me all these questions. I didn't expect it. He was a chiropractor, but he sat there. It turns out he was in the first group of doctors who had brought in a man by the name of George Vitvolkas to teach homeopathy and revive it in the United States, and we'll get into that
in
a few minutes. So he asked me all these questions, and he was a very nice man. And I cried, and I told him my story, and he kept asking me more questions. And at the end he said, I think I can help you. And he disappeared and came back with some little white pills and threw them in my mouth and told me to suck on them because remedies actually get absorbed under the tongue, and told me to come back in 2 weeks. He didn't tell me anything about homeopathy. And I thought, these little pills are going to help me, you know? It's the crisis of my life, and they're going to help me. So I went off. I was not set off for a good placebo experience, you know. I didn't believe in it even. But slowly over the next couple weeks I calmed down, and I'd been crying at night and I'd been crying in the morning. And all of that started to fade, and I started to be able to sleep again, and I started to feel like I was myself again.
Oh, wow.
And nothing had changed in my external life, but something had changed inside. And when I went back, I told him I was doing great. In fact, I didn't tell him, but I felt like I had to learn about this modality because it was so powerful. And it crossed the mind-body gap. Works on all levels. So when I told him I was better, he said, well, you know, I need some help in my office. Would you like to work part-time? And even probably today, but then in Boulder, you had to pray for jobs. You had to beg for jobs. It's a university town, and you know, it's hard to find work. And I said, yeah. And he said, but I have one condition, and that is I'm starting to teach a class in homeopathy, and you would need to come to that class so you could talk to my patients. Oh. So it was all handed to me on a silver platter.
How cool.
So it was so cool, and I got more balanced, and I got better emotionally, and I totally, you know, was gung-ho. I believed in it. I thought it was incredible. But I always felt like, well, if I had something like an infection, maybe a bladder infection, I would still want to get antibiotics, you know. I still didn't believe that it could work on as many levels as it does. So you know what the universe does? It brings you situations that teach you things.
Yes.
I'm sure
aware
you
of
all
this.
know that out there too.
Yeah.
So one Friday afternoon, I started developing this bladder infection, and it just was so fast and so hard and so painful, and I even had blood in my urine, and I was just in agony. And it was a Friday night, and there wasn't anybody I could go to. And so, except the ER, but I didn't have money or insurance, so I wasn't going to go there.
Yeah. So
I talked to a woman who had been studying a little bit longer than I had homeopathy, because our doctor was out of town at his class. And she asked me these questions, and she told me what to take. And I took the remedy, and within an hour, I had no pain, I had no bleeding. I was totally better. Wow. I couldn't even believe it. So in my skepticism still, right, the next morning there was a people's clinic you could go to, and I went there to get checked, and there was no trace that I had ever had any infection.
Wow.
So that blew me away.
Yeah.
And it really kind of set me on this path. And then I proceeded to study more with him. And then in a very unfortunate experience, he was in a private plane crash and died. And all of us who had been studying with him, there were about 8 of us who were really serious, about 25 people who in general, decided to go out to California, where they were having a training program with the other doctors who'd been studying with this man, the focus. So we went all out, and that was the beginning of learning about it, and eventually my helping to organize to start a school and bring people to teach on a more regular basis so that we could all learn. Because in these other countries, like in India, they use homeopathy all the time. It's accepted. In Latin America, South America, they use it. It's used all over the world. It's just in our country, in England also, Germany, but in our country it was stopped when it became very popular. And the reason why it became popular was that we were having these epidemics in the United States of cholera and typhoid. And it was only the homeopaths who stopped the epidemics.
Wow. And so what time period was this?
This was in the late 1700s.
Okay.
Early 1800s. That it became really popular, and doctors who weren't homeopaths became homeopaths because they literally saw people. Well, one of the remedies was called the grave robber, because they saw people who were on their deathbed suddenly get better and be able to function. So that's really the power of homeopathy.
That's incredible. So, Jana was telling me an interesting story before we got on camera about how this came to be, where we were using homeopathy on a regular basis. It was bringing people back, essentially from their deathbed in the 1700s, and then all of a sudden there was a shift, right? And it sort of fell out of fashion, and there's a reason for that.
Right. Well, until then, it was like all the cultured, educated people went to homeopaths. The presidents, all the well-known people. And then a group of doctors and chemists got together because they wanted to create patent medicines that they could sell, that were just theirs. Because if you really know how to make a remedy, you can make a remedy from anything. You can't patent that.
Yeah.
Like you can't patent herbs.
Yeah.
So they got together and they brainstormed of what they could do to get rid of homeopaths so that they could put out their own medicines. And they decided they wanted to get rid of women in medicine. At that time there were some. They wanted to get rid of blacks in medicine, and they wanted to get rid of homeopaths. And so they formulated a plan, and they named themselves. And they named themselves the AMA, the American Medical Association. And that was the beginning of that organization. So it has a not such a great history that way. And then everything just started to die out. 100 medical hospitals were homeopathic hospitals. Flower Fifth Avenue, Hahnemann Hospital in Philadelphia. And all the funding just stopped for creating homeopaths.
Wow.
And that's how it all died out in our country. So
That's
it was just
unfortunate.
the women who were treating their children, who had learned enough to be able to treat their children for common illnesses and first aid, who handed the information down from mother to daughter. And that was the only way that homeopathy survived in this country.
Wow, that's incredible. That's incredible. And it still seems to be mostly the women in this day and age that are, practicing homeopathy and using these alternative forms of medicine and bringing it back out into the public again. So that's incredible. That's interesting.
Yeah. So the foundation, without doing a long thing on the whole history of how homeopathy developed, but the foundation is that we know the body can heal itself. I mean, you get a headache, you get a stomach ache, it's going to go away even if you don't do anything. Sooner or later it'll go away. So the body is very powerful, and we call that healing force the vital force. in the body. And our idea is, instead of going in with a drug that will, we call suppress the symptoms, make them go away, we go in with the frequency of a substance that actually would create the same symptoms in a healthy person. So, just as an example, if you're cutting an onion, you know what happens. Your eyes start running, your nose can start running, you get all irritated. Well, when we process in a very specific way the onion, in order to capture the frequency and not the original, use the chemical part, but we have a process that we do, and it's a process of what we call succussion and dilution. But anyway, we put it through this process until there's nothing left of the original substance. It's just the frequency of the onion. And we give it to somebody whose eyes are running and nose is running. It could be an allergy, it could be a cold, it could be all kinds of things. It reminds the body that there's a problem there, and it speeds up the healing response in the body. So we're using the power of the body to heal itself, instead of telling the body basically to shut up and stop doing what it's doing.
Yeah.
And there's a difference, a real difference. So that's really the underlying sort of concept of homeopathy. There are a lot of other examples. I'll just give one that the audience can learn right away and learn to use right away. Some of you may have heard of arnica in the health food store, right? Most people know it as a topical gel or cream, because arnica as an herb cannot be ingested. It's poisonous, okay? But if we do our process to arnica and we capture the frequency, right, we can remind the body that it needs to heal an injury. And arnica is especially good for any kind of soft tissue injury. If you fall down and get hurt, if you have swelling from an injury, if you go to the dentist and they traumatize your gums in process, if you have to have surgery of any kind, there's going to be swelling, there's going to be bruising, right? So arnica is really good for that, and it's especially good if you take it in your mouth orally as a homeopathic remedy before and after surgery. It's an amazing, amazing healer.
That's incredible. That's a really good tip.
Yeah, right.
And you can get that at any health food store,
Right.
like the little arnica tablets.
Right.
Yeah.
You can ask for the homeopathic remedy of arnica. They now have the higher potency too. If you have a little injury, the 30, which is the average potency they sell, over the counter is fine. You can take a couple doses and it's fine. If you're having like a surgery, or it's a more serious injury, car accident, you can get an arnica, what they call 200 is the potency.
Okay.
And that's stronger and better to use for more serious kinds of injuries that you can get. I'll give you another little tip, which is on the bottle that you get, it says take 6 pills. But because homeopathy is a frequency and it's not a quantity of substance, it doesn't matter how much you take. 1 pill will carry the same amount of frequency really as 5 pills. So you can just pop 1 pill in your mouth and suck on it and basically take it as needed till the swelling and pain are down.
Okay.
And just do 1 pill at a time, but don't tell them I told you.
It's a secret, everyone.
Secret.
So I have a question. So if someone were to take like a homeopathic remedy, but they didn't actually need that specific remedy, like they're just kind of playing around with it themselves, is there any chance of doing harm to the body in doing that? Like, what is the safety of these
Right. That's a good question.
remedies?
The remedies are basically safe, and there's one caveat to that. If you take a remedy and it isn't working, if you think you found one and it isn't working, stop taking it. Don't keep taking it. If you take a remedy too many times and you don't need it and it's not working on you, it actually can increase the possibility of the symptoms getting worse.
Okay.
So you just have to have some common sense. Don't trust what they tell you on the little bottle, because the FDA has made them use one word for the indication of the remedy.
Mm-hmm.
We have 20 pages on every remedy, how it works in every part of the body. So you can't, any remedy could help, for example, with a headache.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to get the right remedy that matches the symptoms, the exact symptoms you have in your headache,
Mm-hmm.
for it to really work.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a sort of thing where it's one size fits all. You walk in the store, you have a headache, and you take a remedy that says headache on it. It's not, it's a lot more specific, which is why homeopathy hasn't exploded here, because it does take someone who knows what they're doing to find the right remedy for what's happening with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And that makes a lot of sense. And for those who are wondering, by the way, I forgot to mention Jana Shiloh. She is based out of Sedona, Arizona, but if you do want to get a consultation with her, we'll put a link below so you can find her website. She can do things via Skype. I should have mentioned that at the beginning.
Oh, that's fine.
Because, it can be really hard to find somebody who's a good homeopath. Like, you're the first one I've come across, and you've done remedies for me, and they've been incredible. I've had really surprisingly good results every time, and like you, I go in very skeptical because it's not something that I can see necessarily. Like, I don't fully grasp how it works yet, and it's just incredible how quickly it does work when it works.
When you get the right remedy, it's like a miracle, and that's where we as homeopaths get hooked to practicing, because it's like, wow, that person's life just changed, or like my life changed when I was treated with homeopathy.
Yeah.
And we even treated your dog, right?
Yeah. Jana made this awesome remedy for our dog who has really bad like post-traumatic stress disorder, essentially, like in a dog. Like, she has really bad anxiety from being abused before we rescued her. And I still, like, when she gets really anxious, I'll pop out that remedy. Like, when we were on our travels and stuff, there were a couple times when I brought it out and it calmed her down. Like, it legitimately, like, it seems like dogs respond even more quickly, and it's even more potent with them for some reason. Is that?
Well, it's a little more difficult with dogs. It's like with babies, you have to really know what's going on, and you can't ask them questions the way I could ask you a question, for example. But there are certain remedies that are good for PTSD that we use with people. We can use them with animals too. And sometimes it's trial and error, because you can't say, well, where do you feel that pain, or where do you feel that anxiety? Is it in your chest or your stomach or whatever? But there's a common range, and I know where to begin anyway with them to see what happens.
Absolutely.
But for anxiety, there's nothing like homeopathy, really.
And so let's get into that, because that's the thing I find the most fascinating about homeopathy. Like, my background obviously is in clinical psychology, and the just ability to use something so simple to help somebody calm down, to calm the nervous system, to deal with specific psycho-emotional issues, and to heal through that with homeopathy. I didn't realize that was even a thing until I met you. So talk a little bit about that and how that works.
Well, it goes back to the same principle. Our principle is like cures like. If something can create something, it can also cure it if you're using the frequency of that remedy or that substance. So I've treated a lot of people with anxiety, and a lot of people with depression, and people who wanted to get off of their meds and didn't know how. I worked with a doctor for 20 years in his office in Sedona. So and we worked together, and he would know how to take them off, because that's not my department, but I would know how to support them and give them the right remedy so that they didn't notice that they were coming off the medication.
Oh, nice.
So it was like we worked together that way. But if you're not on, if you're on medication and you're still anxious or depressed, or you're not on medication and you want to do something, I always say try homeopathy first. Try alternatives. If I can't figure out the right remedy for somebody, which happens sometimes, especially if they don't have a lot of overt symptoms, then I'll say, try acupuncture, you know, try something different before you resort to a drug, which will have side effects, which could have long-term effects in your life. And sometimes those drugs are necessary. I'm not against all drugs. I just like to say, try homeopathy first, you know, and see what it'll do and how it'll help change everything, because our anxieties, they go all the way back. They go back to our childhoods, how we were programmed, even how we were born, what our parents were like. And those are not things that a drug can change. But our bodies know how to heal themselves. They get stuck, which is why we go for help when we don't get better right away. Or, you know, we're stuck in a place. Then we go for help. And if you can try a natural version of that help to start with, then you're better off if you get results than if you have to resort to drugs.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense, and that's good advice.
We've got great remedies for transitions in life, you know, like divorce and death and things like that, to help people. I'll give your audience another tip.
Okay.
Which, if you're ever faced with a major grief, and we all are if we live long enough, you know, whether it's a family member dying or a pet or a divorce or whatever, there is one remedy you can start with, and you can get it at the health food store and see if it works, and it's called Ignatia, and it's spelled Ignatia. And I've had friends say they should put this in the water in funeral homes, because it doesn't suppress the grief, because we all have to go through it, but it gives you an overview. It kind of takes you out of the clutch of hysteria, which comes with a lot of grief, and gives you a little bit of a perspective over it.
Yeah, interesting.
So you're not sucked into the whirlpool so completely. So you can get that at the health food store. You probably can only get a 30 in that. You probably have to repeat it a lot. You need to talk to a homeopath to get higher potency most of the time. So if it's working great for you, but it's not lasting very much, you might want to talk to a homeopath and get a higher potency of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And you can give that to an animal too.
Oh, that's good to know.
So if you're going away and your cat or your dog is depressed, you know, when you leave, you can leave some of that for the pet sitter to give them, or give it to them as you're going out the door, and leave it in case they need to give it to them again.
Oh, that's good to know, because a lot of people's animals have separation anxiety when they leave, even for like work for the day sometimes, depending on the pet. And so it might work for that, but the kind of more long-term trip where they're really in grief and they don't even know if you're coming back or not, it's really good for that, to help with that. Awesome.
So,
well, so for part 2 of this video, just to give everyone a little teaser, Jana has actually developed her own sort of method for dealing with emotional trauma and different, issues in the body, and so it's called Heart Fusion. And so that's why I wanted to bring Jana on here, because I wanted her to talk about this. I have had this experience in working with Jana. She did the Heart Fusion thing with me, and I found it to be incredibly helpful. And I was absolutely shocked at how well it worked. And so, and also because we're talking about, this is our Uranus and Taurus talks. We're talking about innovations and things that have to do with the body, with healing, with natural medicine, with, food, with nutrition, with all of these things that have to do with Taurus, right? These like Taurus sort of themes. And so this is something that is truly very innovative and can help us on a lot of different levels. So thank you so much, Jana, for being here with me.
Oh, I just want to mention one other thing, just that we didn't cover, but just for your viewers to be aware that homeopathy works on acute illness, flus, and like I said, cholera. We don't get cholera here, but flus and all kinds of acute things, and it also works on chronic problems. So we have the power in our potencies to reach back into time, into deep traumas and illnesses that started a long time ago, and that Western medicine really doesn't have answers for. So that's just another thing I wanted to mention, because it covers such a range of different conditions of the human being with homeopathy.
Absolutely, and that's important knowledge to have. Well, thank you so much,
You're
Jana.
welcome.
So we'll be back with part 2. Don't miss it. We're going to be talking about Jana's heart fusion method, and if you want to have a consultation with Jana, either via Skype or in person if you happen to live in northern Arizona, you can find her website at the link below in the description of this video. And is there a good way to contact you? Is it just through your website, or?
Well, people can call me also, and I do like free 10-minute consultations, because people don't really, it's something that hardly anybody understands as homeopathy. But they can call me at 928-282-9362, and we can schedule a 10-minute consultation just to give you an overview if you have a question about whether homeopathy is appropriate for you and the condition that you're dealing with at this time.
All right, awesome. Well, definitely give Jana a call if you're interested. I'll put the number on the screen so they can read it as you're saying it. And thank you so much, and we will be back with part 2.
Okay.